The wind was bitter. Snow covered the mountains as far as the eye could see. The soldiers stopped walking. Before them stood the Alps, a massive mountain range that separates modern-day France from northern Italy. The peaks were covered with snow. The paths were narrow. The cliffs were steep. Many had never seen snow before. Some looked at the mountains. Then looked at their commander. Surely, he could not be serious. One soldier whispered, "We can't cross that." Another shook his head. "No army has ever taken elephants over those mountains." At the front of the army stood Hannibal. He looked at the mountains for a long moment. Then he gave the order to move. The men followed. Not because the journey looked possible, but because they trusted the man leading them. Years later, an old soldier would tell his grandchildren about that day. "They say history remembers battles," he would say. "But I remember the mountains. I remember the cold. I remember my friends who never made it across. And I remember one man who refused to turn back. That man was Hannibal." Today, people often remember him as the general who crossed the Alps with elephants. But that was only one chapter of his story. Before he became Rome's greatest enemy, he was a boy growing up in Carthage, the powerful city on the coast of North Africa, in what is now Tunisia. He watched his homeland struggle after losing a painful war to Rome. He saw a proud people determined to rise again. No one knew that this young boy would one day lead one of the most daring military journeys in history. No one knew he would defeat the armies of the world's rising superpower. And no one knew that, more than 2,000 years later, military leaders around the world would still study his ideas. Welcome to the African Archive, where we bring Africa's history to life through careful research and powerful storytelling. If you enjoy discovering the remarkable people, kingdoms, and civilizations that shaped our world, subscribe and join us on this journey through Africa's past. This is the story of Hannibal, the African general who terrified Rome. Chapter 1. A boy who swore an oath. Long before Hannibal became one of history's greatest generals, he was simply a boy. He was born around 247 BC in the city of Carthage, on the coast of North Africa, in what is now Tunisia. Carthage was one of the richest cities in the ancient world. Its ships sailed across the Mediterranean Sea, carrying goods between Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Its busy markets were filled with merchants from many different lands. But behind the wealth and success, there was pain. Only a few years before Hannibal was born, Carthage had lost the First Punic War to Rome. It had lost important lands. It had paid a huge amount of money to its enemy. Many people feared that Rome would only grow stronger. Hannibal grew up hearing those stories. His father was Hannibal Barca, one of Carthage's most respected military commanders. Hannibal believed that one day Carthage would have another chance. He wanted his son to be ready. According to ancient historians, before Hannibal left for a military journey to Spain, the country we know today by that name, he took young Hannibal to a temple. There, he asked his son to make a promise. The boy placed his hand on the altar and swore that he would never be a friend of Rome. We cannot be certain that every detail of this story happened exactly as it has been told for centuries. But we do know that Hannibal spent the rest of his life fighting Rome. Whether the oath happened exactly this way or not, it reflects the determination that shaped his life. Among the soldiers preparing to leave with Hannibal was a young recruit. He was not a famous warrior. He was the son of a farmer. This young soldier is our guide through the story. He watched Hannibal grow from a curious boy into a confident young man. Sometimes he saw the boy walking beside his father, asking questions about battles, maps, and distant lands. Hannibal wanted to know everything. He listened more than he spoke. He watched experienced soldiers train. He learned how armies moved, how leaders made decisions, and how courage could inspire ordinary people to do extraordinary things. When Hannibal took his army to Spain, Hannibal went with him. Spain became his classroom. He learned how to lead soldiers, how to build alliances with local tribes, and how to survive far from home. Years passed. Then tragedy struck. Hamilcar died during one of his military campaigns. Leadership later passed to Hasdrubal the Fair, Hamilcar's son-in-law. When Hasdrubal was killed several years later, the army faced an important decision. Who would lead them now? The soldiers already knew their answer. They chose Hannibal. He was still a young man, only in his mid-20s. But they trusted him. Not because of his family name alone, but because he had earned their respect. The young recruit who had once watched Hannibal as a boy now stood proudly in his army. He believed his commander was ready. He believed Carthage was ready. What he did not know was that Hannibal was about to make a decision so bold that the entire ancient world would remember it for thousands of years. Instead of waiting for Rome to attack, he would take the war to Rome itself. Chapter 2. The Impossible March. The war had begun. Rome expected Hannibal to attack by sea. That was the fastest route from North Africa to Italy. But Hannibal had a different plan. He knew Rome had built a powerful navy. If he sailed straight to Italy, Roman warships could stop him before he even reached land. So he chose a route no one expected. He would attack from the north. To do that, he first left Spain, where Carthage had a strong army and controlled important territories. From there, he began a long journey on foot toward Italy. The young soldier could hardly believe what he was hearing. The army was not just marching into another country. They were preparing to cross some of the most dangerous mountains in the world. Their journey took them across the Pyrenees, a mountain range between modern-day Spain and France. The climb was difficult. Some soldiers turned back. Others became sick or injured. But Hannibal kept the army moving. When they came down from the mountains, they entered Gaul, the land that is now mostly France. Some local tribes welcomed them. Others attacked them. Every day brought a new challenge. The soldiers had to cross wide rivers with strong currents. They built rafts for the horses. The elephants were harder to move. Some refused to step into the water. Others panicked. Yet somehow, Hannibal's men found ways to get them across. The young soldier had never worked so hard in his life. Just when many believed the worst was over, they looked ahead. In the distance stood the Alps. The Alps are a huge mountain range that separates modern-day France from northern Italy. Their peaks were covered with snow. Their paths were narrow and dangerous. Many people believed no army could ever cross them. Some of Hannibal's own soldiers begged him to turn back. They were tired, hungry, cold. But Hannibal refused. He knew that if they could cross those mountains, they would enter Italy from a direction the Romans never expected. The climb was terrifying. Snow covered the ground. Strong winds pushed against the men. Loose rocks rolled down the steep slopes. Some soldiers slipped and fell into deep valleys. Many horses died. Most of the elephants did not survive the journey. The young soldier wrapped himself in whatever cloth he could find. His hands were numb. His feet ached. Some mornings, he wondered if he would ever see another sunrise. Then he would look ahead. Hannibal was always there. Walking with his men. Sharing the same code. Facing the same danger. He never asked them to go where he would not go himself. After many exhausting days, the army finally reached the other side. Below them lay Italy. The Roman Republic had spent years preparing for war. But it never imagined an enemy would appear from the snow-covered mountains. Hannibal had done what many believed was impossible. The hardest part of the journey was over. Now, the real war was about to begin. Chapter 3. Rome's Darkest Days. When Hannibal's army came down from the Alps, the Romans were shocked. They had expected him to arrive by sea. Instead, he had appeared from the mountains. It was a move no one had imagined. The young soldier looked around at his fellow fighters. They were tired. Many had lost friends during the long journey. Most of the elephants were gone. The army was much smaller than when it had left Spain. But they had made it. Now they stood on Roman soil. Rome quickly sent an army to stop them. The two sides met near the Trebia River in northern Italy. The battle was fierce. Hannibal knew his men were outnumbered. So he relied on something more powerful than numbers. He relied on strategy. He hid some of his soldiers where the Romans could not see them. When the fighting began, those hidden soldiers attacked from behind. The Roman army was thrown into confusion. Hannibal won his first great victory in Italy. The young soldier could hardly believe it. They had defeated one of the strongest armies in the ancient world. But Hannibal was not finished. The following year, he met another Roman army near Lake Trasimene, a large lake in central Italy. Early one morning, thick mist covered the land. The Romans marched forward, unable to see what lay ahead. Hannibal had already placed his soldiers in the hills around the lake. When the Romans entered the narrow path, the attack began. They were surrounded. Many were killed. Others tried to escape into the lake. It became one of the largest ambushes in military history. Fear spread across Rome. People began asking the same question. Can anyone stop Hannibal? The answer came the next year. In 216 BC, the two armies met near Cannae, a town in southeastern Italy. This would become the most famous battle of Hannibal's life. The Roman army was much larger. Its leaders believed that strength in numbers would guarantee victory. Hannibal had a different plan. He allowed the center of his army to slowly move backward as the Romans pushed forward. The Romans believed they were winning. They moved deeper and deeper into Hannibal's lines. Then everything changed. Hannibal's soldiers on both sides attacked at the same time. His cavalry, the soldiers fighting on horseback, struck from behind. The Roman army was trapped. There was nowhere to run. By the end of the battle, tens of thousands of Roman soldiers had been killed or captured. It was one of the worst defeats in Rome's history. The young soldier stood in silence after the battle. He had never seen anything like it. His friends shouted with joy. Some cried with relief. Others simply sat on the ground, too tired to speak. For the first time, it seemed that Rome could actually be defeated. Across Italy, some cities left Rome and joined Hannibal. Even Rome itself was filled with fear. Parents worried for their children. Leaders prepared for another attack. Many believed Hannibal would soon march into the city. But that moment never came. Hannibal had won brilliant victories. Yet winning battles and winning a war are not always the same thing. Rome refused to surrender. Instead, it changed its strategy. And that decision would slowly turn the war in Rome's favor. In the next chapter, we'll see how the hunter became the hunted, and why history began to change once again. Chapter 4. When the war turned. After the victory at Cannae, many believed the war was almost over. The young soldier believed it too. Rome had lost one army after another. Its people were afraid. Some of Rome's allies had joined Hannibal. Surely, the mighty Roman Republic would surrender. But Rome refused. Instead of chasing Hannibal into another battle, the Romans changed their plan. They stopped giving him the kind of fight he wanted. When Hannibal marched toward them, they often pulled back. When he looked for a battle, they avoided it. Instead, they attacked his smaller groups, cut off his supplies, and waited for the right moment. It was a slow and frustrating war. The young soldier could feel the difference. The victories became fewer. Food became harder to find. The army was far from home. Many of the experienced soldiers who had crossed the Alps were gone. Some had died in battle. Others had died from sickness or exhaustion. The men who remained were tired. Still, they refused to leave their commander. Years passed. Hannibal sent messages back to Carthage asking for more soldiers and supplies. Some help arrived. But it was never enough. Carthage was fighting in other places as well. Its leaders could not give Hannibal everything he needed. The young soldier often wondered what might have happened if more help had reached them. Would Rome have fallen? No one can answer that question. History leaves us with possibilities, not certainties. While Hannibal remained in Italy, a young Roman commander named Scipio began changing the course of the war. Instead of fighting Hannibal directly, Scipio attacked Carthaginian lands in Spain. One by one, Rome captured those territories. Carthage lost valuable soldiers, resources, and money. But Scipio was not finished. He made an even bolder decision. He carried the war to North Africa, where Carthage itself stood. When news reached Hannibal, everything changed. After nearly 15 years in Italy, he was ordered to return home. The young soldier watched as the army prepared to leave. They had crossed rivers, climbed mountains, won battles that people still talk about today. Now they were sailing back across the Mediterranean Sea to defend their own homeland. As Hannibal's ship disappeared toward the coast of North Africa, the soldier looked back at Italy one last time. So much had happened there. So many friends had been lost. So many victories had been won. Yet the war was not over. The final battle was still waiting. It would take place not in Italy, but on the soil of Carthage itself. And there, the fate of Hannibal, Carthage, and Rome would finally be decided. Chapter 5. The Last Battle. When Hannibal returned to North Africa, he was coming home for the first time in many years. The people of Carthage welcomed him with hope. To them, he was still the great commander who had crossed the Alps, defeated Rome again and again, and made the mighty republic tremble. The young soldier could see the hope in their faces. They believed Hannibal would save Carthage one last time. But this was not the same army that had marched into Italy years before. Many of Hannibal's most experienced soldiers had died. Others had grown old after years of war. The army was no longer as strong as it had once been. At the same time, Rome had grown stronger. Its commander, Scipio, had become one of Rome's finest generals. He had learned from Hannibal's victories. Instead of repeating Rome's old mistakes, he carefully studied the Carthaginian commander's methods. Scipio also gained an important ally. King Massinissa, the ruler of Numidia, a kingdom in what is now Algeria and part of Tunisia, brought thousands of skilled horsemen to fight alongside Rome. Their speed and experience would play a major role in the battle ahead. In 202 BC, the two armies met near Zama, a town in what is now Tunisia. This would be the final battle of the Second Punic War. Before the fighting began, ancient historians say Hannibal and Scipio met to discuss peace. No agreement was reached. Both men knew that the future of their nations would soon be decided on the battlefield. The battle began. Hannibal sent his war elephants charging toward the Roman army. Years earlier, elephants had frightened Rome's soldiers. This time, the Romans were ready. They opened gaps in their lines, allowing many of the elephants to run harmlessly through instead of crashing into their ranks. Some frightened elephants even turned back, causing confusion among Carthage's own troops. The fighting continued for hours. At first, neither side could gain a clear advantage. Then the Numidian horsemen returned after chasing away Carthage's cavalry. They attacked Hannibal's army from behind. The Carthaginian soldiers were trapped. The young soldier fought with everything he had. He saw friends fall beside him. He heard the cries of wounded men. He watched the army that had once crossed mountains and defeated Rome's greatest armies begin to break apart. By the end of the day, the battle was over. For the first time in his life, Hannibal had been defeated in a major battle. Carthage had lost the war. The peace that followed was severe. Carthage gave up its remaining territories outside North Africa. It surrendered most of its warships. It agreed to pay a huge amount of money to Rome over many years. Most importantly, it could no longer go to war without Rome's permission. The young soldier walked through the streets of Carthage in silence. The city still stood. Its people were alive. But something precious had been lost. The dream that Hannibal had carried across mountains and battlefields had come to an end. Yet even in defeat, the soldier noticed something remarkable. No one spoke of Hannibal as a failure. They spoke of his courage, his determination, his brilliance. They knew they had followed an extraordinary leader. The war was over. But Hannibal's story was not. His greatest battle had ended. His greatest legacy was only beginning. Chapter 6. The general who became a legend. The war was over. Rome had won. Carthage had been forced to accept peace. For many people, Hannibal's story should have ended there. But it didn't. After the war, Hannibal stayed in Carthage and became a public leader. He worked to improve the city's government and help its economy recover. Many citizens respected him not only as a general, but also as a man who wanted to rebuild his homeland. Rome, however, still feared him. Even though the war had ended, Roman leaders believed that as long as Hannibal was alive, he could become a threat again. Under pressure from Rome, Hannibal left Carthage. He traveled across the eastern Mediterranean, advising kings who opposed Rome. Wherever he went, his reputation followed him. Friends admired him. Enemies respected him. Years passed. The young soldier who had marched across the Alps was now an old man. His hair had turned grey. His body carried the scars of many battles. Sometimes, his grandchildren would gather around him and ask, "Grandfather, what was Hannibal really like?" The old soldier would smile. He was brave. But many men are brave. He was clever. But many men are clever. What made Hannibal different was that he never asked us to face danger while he stayed behind. He walked where we walked. He suffered when we suffered. And when we believed something was impossible, he showed us it could be done. Not long afterwards, Hannibal received terrible news. Rome wanted him captured. He knew what would happen if he was taken alive. Around 183 BC, while living far from home, Hannibal chose to take poison rather than become a prisoner of Rome. His life ended. But his story did not. More than 2,000 years later, students at military academies around the world still study his battles. His victory at Cannae is still taught as one of the greatest examples of battlefield strategy ever recorded. His crossing of the Alps, the huge mountain range between modern-day France and Italy, continues to inspire people because it proved that determination can overcome challenges that seem impossible. Even Roman writers, who had every reason to hate him, admitted that Hannibal was an extraordinary commander. That may be the greatest sign of all. When even your enemies respect you, your place in history is secure. The old soldier looked toward the sea one final time. He thought about the boy he had once been. The long road through Spain. The freezing mountains. The victories. The defeats. The friends he had lost. And the man he had followed. Hannibal did not destroy Rome. He did not win the war. But he achieved something few people ever do. He changed history. Thank you for joining us on the African Archive as we explore the life of one of Africa's greatest military leaders. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the African Archive and turn on notifications. Together, we'll continue uncovering the remarkable people, kingdoms, and civilizations that shaped Africa and helped shape the world. Because some people are remembered for the battles they win. Others are remembered because they changed the way the world thinks. Hannibal did both. And that is why the world still remembers his name.